On July the 1st, 2026, Princess Diana would have turned 65 years old.
There are birthdays that pass quietly, and there are birthdays that stop a country and make it think. July 1st, 2026 was one of those days. It was the day Diana, Princess of Wales, would have turned 65. She never got the chance to reach that age. She never got to grow old, to watch her grandchildren grow taller than her, to sit in a garden somewhere and simply exist as an older woman with nothing left to prove. She was taken from the world at 36, in a summer that Britain has never fully recovered from. And every year since, her birthday arrives like a quiet ache, a reminder of a life interrupted, and a family that has spent almost 3 decades learning how to carry that absence in public while still protecting what is private. This is not a story about a headline. It is a story about what it means to lose a mother in front of the entire world, and what it means to try, year after year, to keep her present for children who came long after she was gone. It is a story about inheritance, not of money or title, but of memory. And on a birthday she never reached, that inheritance felt more visible than ever. To understand why a single date carries this much emotional weight, it helps to remember who Diana actually was, stripped of the myth and the magazine covers. She was born on July 1st, 1961, into a family with deep roots in the English aristocracy, and she married into the most scrutinized institution in the country at just 19 years old. From the very beginning, the public claimed a piece of her that was never entirely hers to give. Every dress, every glance, every private sadness became public material. And yet, in the middle of that suffocating visibility, she did something remarkable. She used the very attention that trapped her to shine a light on the people the world preferred not to look at. She sat with AIDS patients and held their hands at a time when many people, out of fear and ignorance, would not. She walked through active minefields to force governments to confront a crisis they had ignored for years. She visited homeless shelters not for photographs, but because she believed her sons needed to see a version of the world that palaces do not show. She turned royal compassion from a formality into something that looked and felt like empathy. That was her real legacy, not the tabloids, not the tragedy, but the quiet insistence that kindness should be visible, physical, and unafraid. She died on August 31st, 1997, in a car crash in Paris, when her eldest son was 15 and her youngest was 12. The image of 2 boys walking behind their mother's coffin, watched by millions of strangers, remains one of the most painful moments in modern British memory. It was grief with no privacy at all. A child's most personal loss became a nation's shared spectacle. And that experience shaped, more than almost anything else, how her sons would go on to think about grief, memory, and the difference between what the public is owed and what a family is allowed to keep for itself. That is what makes a 65th birthday so different from an anniversary of loss. An anniversary of death asks people to remember an ending. A birthday asks something harder. It asks people to imagine a whole life that never got to happen. It invites you to picture the version of Diana who never existed. The grandmother in her mid-60s, perhaps a little slower, perhaps grayer, laughing with grandchildren she never got to meet, retired from the spotlight in the ordinary way that most people eventually are. That imagined woman is, in some ways, more painful than the one the world lost, because she represents everything that was quietly stolen, not just a mother, but decades of ordinary, unremarkable, precious time. For the children left behind, growing up without her did not mean growing up without her influence. It meant growing up trying to reconstruct her from fragments, old photographs, home videos, the memories other people were willing to share, and their unscattered recollections from childhood. It meant becoming the keepers of a story that the whole world thought it already knew, even though so much of the real woman never made it into any headline. That responsibility does not disappear with time. If anything, it grows heavier as the next generation arrives. Children who never met their grandmother at all, who know her only through photographs, family stories, and the tone of voice their own parents use when they say her name. For a parent in that position, a milestone birthday becomes something more than a private moment of grief. It becomes an opportunity, maybe even a duty, to make sure the story does not fade into something distant and unreal. To make sure grandmother is not just a word in a history book, but a person with a laugh, a way of crouching down to a child's eye level, a habit of choosing warmth over formality. This is the quiet, unglamorous work of memory keeping that most families do in their own way, royal or not. It rarely looks dramatic. It looks like telling a small story at bedtime. It looks like keeping a photograph where a child will see it every day, not as a shrine, but as a normal part of the house. It looks like answering, patiently, The sudden questions a child asks when they are just old enough to understand that they are named after someone, or that someone important is missing from the family photographs. Grief, when it is handled well, does not stay frozen in tragedy. It slowly turns into inheritance, something a child can hold onto rather than something that only weighs a parent down. There is a particular kind of tenderness in a parent trying to give their child a version of a grandparent that the child never got the chance to earn on their own. It cannot be manufactured through public gestures or official statements. It happens in ordinary, unremarkable moments that mean everything to the people inside them and almost nothing to anyone watching from outside, which is exactly the point. The people who loved Diana most did not need a monument to remember her. They needed private permission to feel their grief in peace, away from cameras, away from institutions, away from a public that often treated her life as belonging to everyone but herself. That is perhaps the deepest lesson in this story, and it is one that extends far beyond any one family, royal or otherwise. Grief does not ask to be performed. It asks to be carried honestly. A person who is loved does not disappear the moment they die. They continue on in the small habits, the phrases, the values passed down to people who may never have met them. A grandmother who died decades before her grandchildren were born can still shape how those children see kindness, how they treat strangers, how they understand that compassion is something you do with your hands and your presence, not just your intentions. Diana's 65th birthday will not bring her back. No birthday ever does. But it offers something else, a moment to notice how memory quietly moves forward through time, carried not by statues or institutions, but by ordinary people choosing, again and again, not to let someone be forgotten. A missed birthday becomes less about the woman who is absent and more about everyone who continues to hold a place for her at the table, in conversation, in the stories told to children too young to have known her themselves. In the end, the most powerful tributes are rarely the loud ones. They are not press releases or grand ceremonies. They are the small, deliberate choices a family makes, year after year, to keep someone present in spirit even when they can no longer be present in person. A photograph kept close. A story retold gently. A name passed down and explained with care. These are the things that outlast headlines, because they are not meant for an audience at all. They are meant only for the people who still, all these years later, quietly miss someone they loved, and who have decided that love does not end just because a life did. Diana did not get to grow old. She did not get to see the grandchildren who now carry pieces of her name and, perhaps, pieces of her spirit. But in every small act of remembering, every story told, every photograph shared, every child who grows up understanding a little more about who she really was, her life continues in the only way any life truly can after it ends. Not in monuments, not in statements, but in the people who choose, quietly and without an audience, to keep her close.